أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. صدق الله العظيم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable guests, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I welcome you to the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad for a seminar titled International Year of Peace and Trust, Cooperation for Peace, organized by China-Pakistan Study Center in collaboration with the Embassy of Turkmenistan and UN Resident Office in Pakistan. Without any further delay, I now request Dr. Talat Shabir, Director, China-Pakistan Study Center, for his introductory remarks. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Muhammad Yahya, UN Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator in Pakistan. His Excellency Ambassador Mamlav Mu, Ambassador of Turkmenistan and Dean of Diplomatic Corps in Pakistan. Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman, Board of Governors. Ambassador Sohail Mahmood, Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. It's indeed an honor and privilege for me to welcome you all to this significant event organized to mark the International Year of Peace and Trust 2025. This gathering is a reflection of our shared commitment to fostering dialogue, cooperation, and mutual trust in the world increasingly defined by complex challenges. I extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed partners, Embassy of Turkmenistan in Pakistan and United Nations Resident Office in Islamabad, for their invaluable support in organizing this timely discussion. The United Nations General Assembly Resolution 78/266, adopted on March 21st, 2024, reaffirms the fundamental principles of peaceful coexistence and trust building among nations. It underscores the importance of multilateralism, preventive diplomacy, and dialogue as essential tools for conflict resolution. The resolution highlights that peace is not just the absence of conflict, but a dynamic, participatory process where differences are embraced and mutual understanding is cultivated. In this spirit, today's seminar seeks to explore pathways for strengthening cooperation for sustainable peace and trust among nations. Today's seminar brings together eminent policymakers, diplomats, scholars, and practitioners to explore how nations can work together to build sustainable peace through dialogue, diplomacy, and cooperation. As we reflect on regional and global peace initiatives, we must recognize that Trust between nations is fundamental to stability, development, and human security. Pakistan, as a staunch advocate of peaceful coexistence, has always supported international efforts aimed at conflict resolution and dialogue-based diplomacy. In this context, Turkmenistan's policy of permanent neutrality offers a unique model for strengthening global peace and stability. The country's initiatives in fostering regional cooperation and multilateral dialogue underscore the importance of peaceful dispute resolution and confidence-building measures. At the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, we remain committed to promoting meaningful discussions on peace, trust, and multilateralism. This seminar provides an important platform for exchange of ideas and shaping policies that contribute to a more stable, prosperous, and peaceful world. With these words, I once again welcome you all and look forward to insightful deliberations during the seminar. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Talat. I now request Ambassador Sohail Mahmood, Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, for his welcome remarks. Ambassador Sohail Mahmood is currently serving as Director General of the Institute of Strategic Studies. With an illustrious career in the Pakistan Foreign Service, he has held numerous key positions, including Pakistan High Commissioner to India and Ambassador to Turkey and Thailand. Sir, you may have the floor, please. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished participants, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome everyone to the ISSI. The ISSI is privileged to organize this important seminar in collaboration with the Embassy of Turkmenistan and the UN Resident Coordinator Office in Islamabad. We deeply appreciate Excellency Atajan Mavlamov, Ambassador of Turkmenistan and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, for his valuable initiative. Indeed, Turkmenistan's leadership role in steering this process globally is highly appreciable. We are also sincerely grateful to Resident Coordinator Mr. Muhammad Yahya and other esteemed speakers for joining us. We look forward to their enlightening views. The United Nations General Assembly's proclamation of 2025 as the International Year for Peace and Trust through Resolution 78/266 reflects a profound commitment. It is a testament to the global desire to foster understanding, cooperation, and harmony in a world often marked by division, discord, and conflict. Its principles and central themes resonate deeply with Pakistan's vision of peace, stability, and multilateral cooperation. Pakistan was one of the co-sponsors of this important resolution, which was adopted unanimously by the General Assembly. Resolution 78/266 is a call to action, a collective appeal to nations and peoples to reaffirm their dedication to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. It particularly reiterates the importance of settling disputes through peaceful means and reaffirms the determination to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It emphasizes the vital role of diplomacy and multilateralism in advancing sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights. These three interconnected pillars of the United Nations are not just aspirations, they are indispensable conditions for building a livable world. Distinguished participants, as noted in the resolution, peace is not merely the absence of conflict. It is a dynamic and participatory process. It requires dialogue, mutual understanding, and the ability to accept and respect differences. This deeper understanding of peace is central to the resolution's vision. It calls upon member states to view peace and trust as foundational values that underpin not only international relations but also societal cohesion. The resolution's emphasis on preventive diplomacy is particularly pertinent. In a world witnessing growing incidents of war and armed conflict, as well as complex and multifaceted challenges, the need to address the root causes of conflict has never been greater. Preventive diplomacy through dialogue, mediation, and confidence building measures is a critical tool in averting crises and fostering stability. The United Nations has played a pivotal role in this domain, and its efforts must be supported and amplified by all relevant stakeholders. Equally important is the emphasis laid on the pacific settlement of disputes. We have seen the devastating consequences of a genocidal war in the Middle East and the continuing human and material toll of the conflict in Europe. In this region, the long-standing unresolved Jammu and Kashmir dispute continues to seriously threaten peace and stability. There are resolutions of the UN Security Council awaiting implementation. It remains incumbent upon the United Nations and the international community to fulfill their obligations towards promoting just and lasting solutions of these disputes. The resolution acknowledges that peace and trust are not abstract concepts, but lived experiences. They entail listening to one another, recognizing the dignity of every individual, and promoting social inclusion, democracy, and good governance. These principles are the building blocks of a culture of peace, a culture that we all must actively nurture within societies and across borders. The International Year of Peace and Trust also serves as a moment of reflection on the contributions of various actors to the global peace agenda. The role of women and youth, as highlighted in the resolution, is particularly noteworthy. Women have long been at the forefront of peace-building efforts, often serving as bridges of understanding and agents of reconciliation in their communities. Similarly, the energy and innovation of young people can drive transformative change, making their active participation in conflict resolution and peace building indispensable. In the same vein, the importance of education in promoting a culture of peace cannot be overemphasized. Education is a powerful tool for fostering respect, reconciliation, and nonviolence. It equips individuals with the knowledge and values needed to navigate differences and build harmonious relationships. Investment in education, particularly for the marginalized and underserved communities, are investments in a more peaceful and equitable world. Excellencies, the resolution also underscores the significance of partnerships in advancing the ideals of peace and trust. Turkmenistan's initiative to host the International Forum of Peace and Trust in December 2025 exemplifies the kind of collaborative efforts needed to galvanize global action. Such platforms provide opportunities for dialogue, knowledge sharing, and the exploration of innovative solutions to the challenges we face. In this regard, the crucial role of regional cooperation entails special significance. Regional and sub-regional organizations have unique capacities to address conflicts and promote stability within their respective contexts. Their efforts, complemented by international support, can create zones of peace and enhance collective security. Pakistan, as an active participant in regional forums and initiatives, remains committed to fostering such cooperation. Pakistan has a proud history of contributing to global peace efforts, from extensive participation in UN peacekeeping operations to advocacy for the peaceful resolution of disputes. Pakistan has consistently demonstrated its commitment to the principles of peace and trust. These efforts are rooted in the belief that dialogue and diplomacy are the most effective means of addressing conflicts and building sustainable peace. As an elected member of the UN Security Council for the term 2025-26, Pakistan would remain in the vanguard of the efforts for promoting these objectives. Likewise, whether it is combating terrorism, addressing climate change, or advancing sustainable development, Pakistan continues to be a steadfast partner in the pursuit of common goals of peace, stability, and development. The resolution also underlines the importance of the contributions of civil society, academia, and the private sector in advancing the peace agenda. Their innovative approaches, grounded in grassroots realities, often serve as catalysts for change. By building bridges between communities, advocating for marginalized voices, and fostering dialogue, they play a pivotal role in creating conditions for lasting peace. It is of utmost importance that they make relentless efforts to counter hate speech, divisive rhetoric, and misinformation and disinformation. As called for by the resolution, all member states are encouraged to ensure special observance of the International Year of Peace and Trust throughout 2025. This year also coincides with two other milestones: the 30th anniversary of Turkmenistan's neutrality and the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. These commemorations would offer further opportunities to highlight the salience of peace and trust throughout the year. For its part, in collaboration with other partners, the ISSI will continue to promote these values through its own range of activities. With these words, I thank you all again for your participation, and we look forward to an enriching discussion during the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I now request His Excellency Mr. Atadjan Movlamov for his remarks. His Excellency Mr. Atadjan Movlamov is a seasoned diplomat and ambassador of Turkmenistan to Pakistan. He has held various key positions, including ambassador to Afghanistan and counselor to the embassies in Tajikistan and Iran. Ambassador Movlamov is also Dean of the Diplomatic Corps in Islamabad, fluent in Russian, Pashto, Farsi, and English. He brings extensive experience in international relations and diplomacy. Sir, you may have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. His Excellency Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman ISSI, His Excellency Ambassador Sohail Mahmood, Director General ISSI, DM Muhammad Yahya, UN Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator, Excellencies, members of Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and assalamu alaikum. I want to begin my speech by thanking the ambassadors Khalid Mahmood and Sohail Mahmood and all team of ISSI for organizing this seminar on important topic. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that nowadays the international community witnesses the growing complexity in global politics. In this regard, I want to bring to your attention that given the current conditions in the international arena, Turkmenistan advocates for consolidating international efforts to overcome the current crisis, forming appropriate political and diplomatic prerequisites and opportunities for this purpose on a creative platform. Based on this, during the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Turkmenistan initiated the General Assembly's resolution, International Year of Peace and Trust 2025, which was unanimously adopted with the co-sponsorship of 86 states. The resolution rejects the fundamental purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, in particular the commitment to settle disputes by peaceful means and methods. This resolution became a practical embodiment of the philosophy of new international relations. Dialogue is a guarantee of peace, declared by the national leader of Turkmen people, chairman of the Khalq Maslahati of Turkmenistan, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. To support the practical implementation of this resolution, Turkmenistan adopted a special program called the Concept of Activities and Priorities of Turkmenistan within the framework of the International Year of Peace and Trust. On January 14, 2025, the national leader of Turkmen people, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, received a phone call from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. During a telephone conversation, the UN Secretary General emphasized the special attention of the organization to the interaction with Turkmenistan, which stands for strengthening peace in the regional and global dimensions. The national leader of Turkmen people outlined the main direction of the concept of activities and priorities of Turkmenistan within the framework of the International Year of Peace and Trust, for the development of which consultations were held with the UN specialized agencies. The concept of activities and priorities of Turkmenistan is largely based on the content of the Summit of the Future, convened at the initiative of the United Nations last September, and therefore Turkmenistan considers the concept as a special contribution to the implementation of the final document of the summit, the Pact for the Future. Noting the importance of the concept, aimed at consolidating efforts to address pressing issues of the global agenda, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres fully supported this concept. Turkmenistan reflects the decision of United Nations General Assembly to declare 2025 as the International Year of Peace and Trust as a global scale event and a genuine opportunity for a qualitative transition to a new stage in international relations. This task should be solved on a systemic basis and have the supporting legal and institutional mechanism. Acting in this logic, in 2023, from the rostrum of the UN General Assembly, the President of Turkmenistan, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, put forward an initiative to develop a global security strategy. We see it as a system of views and principles for organizing interstate and international relations in the 21st century. The strategy entails a comprehensive approach to addressing global challenges based on the interconnection of all aspects of security: military, political, economic, energy, environmental, biological, man-made, and informational. In this respect, the global security strategy is intended to serve as an updated international legal framework for interstate relations, reflecting the existing objective realities and needs of global development. Therefore, in conceptual terms, Turkmenistan considers the idea of developing the strategy to be a logical and organic link in the affirmation of the principles of peace and trust. It is proposed to include in it a number of areas of UN activity. In particular, first, preventive diplomacy as a tool for preventing and neutralizing conflicts. Second, utilization of the potential of neutrality for the peaceful, political, and diplomatic settlement of disputes and contradictions. Third, restoration of a culture of trusting dialogue. Thus, in proposing the idea of developing a new mechanism aimed at ensuring global security, Turkmenistan strictly relies on the solid international legal framework of the United Nations, reflecting the views of the world community on current challenges and ways to overcome them. The International Year of Peace and Trust logically coincides with the 30th anniversary of universal recognition of the permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan. In accordance with the United Nations General Assembly resolution, permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan unanimously adopted on 12 December 1995. The neutral status of our country was reaffirmed by General Assembly resolution on 3 June 2015. Over the years, the evolution of our neutrality has proven its compliance with the basic values and goals of the United Nations and has been recognized as a common asset of the world community. This was further affirmed by the proclamation of December 12 as the International Year of Neutrality by the UN General Assembly. Based on this neutrality, its principles and practical tools should be used much more widely for the international community, by the international community. The potential of neutrality is enormous. It is not only a national model of foreign policy for a number of states that have brought them peace, good neighborliness, and prosperity, but also an effective platform for resolving emerging contradictions by peaceful means at the negotiating table. In this sense, the International Year of Peace and Trust provides an opportunity for the transition of neutrality into a practical framework as a platform for the consolidation of all adequate and responsible forces, states or group of countries. Turkmenistan counts on the support of neutral, non-aligned, non-bloc countries, as well as all states in the matter of uniting their capabilities, experience, and authority to create conditions for the transition to peaceful, political, and diplomatic methods of resolving existing and potential conflicts. Noting the role of the community of nations, Turkmenistan hopes that during the International Year of Peace and Trust, which also coincides with the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, all member states will reaffirm their commitment to the United Nations Charter and its mandate as the only international organization with universal legitimacy. In conclusion of my speech, I would like to once again express my gratitude to organizers and all the distinguished guests for participation in today's seminar and for being such a generous audience to provide me this opportunity to speak. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, I now request Mr. Muhammad Yahya, UN Resident Coordinator in Pakistan, to please make his remarks. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, Excellency Ambassador of Turkmenistan, Ambassador Haider, other ambassadors who are here from the diplomatic corps, representative of civil society organizations, and also want to recognize the Director General of ISI for hosting us today. I'm honored to be here today as we celebrate the 2025 International Year of Peace and Trust, as proclaimed in the UN resolution adopted in March last year with the leadership of the government of Turkmenistan. As you know, the resolution initiated by Turkmenistan was adopted unanimously, and you know these days anything to go through the UN without any opposition is a miracle, which tells you how much the world really recognizes the importance of such a day of international peace globally. And I also want to thank Pakistan for supporting the resolution as one of the co-sponsors and among the 86 countries who sponsored the resolution. As you know, the resolution aims to promote global dialogue and foster international cooperation. I offer my congratulations to the Dean, as 2025 also marks the 30th anniversary of the universal recognition of the permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan in accordance with UN resolution, again unanimously adopted in 1995. We're here today, and you all know we live in an increasingly fragmented and intolerant world that is full of misunderstanding and hostility. The need for peace is becoming more and more imperative. We at the United Nations were created to bring about peace to the world. The resolution reflects the fundamental purpose and the principles of the UN Charter, which commits to settling disputes through a peaceful means in order to save the world from the scourge of war. One of the three pillars of the United Nations Charter is peace and security, along with sustainable development and human rights. With all of them interconnected, we hope today is a start this year, give us an opportunity to instill the concept of dialogue in the international system, peace and trust, and inclusive processes. It also means accepting differences and having accepting differences and having ability to listen and reflect and appreciate other opinions. It means living together in harmony and unity. It also means the absence of violent conflict, but also ability to hold positive and participatory dialogue. And I think this year, is a reflection of how far we want to go, but how far we are from the reality of peace, considering where the world is with the conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine, Sudan, and most recently the Democratic Republic of Congo, among other areas where the issue of and the scourge of war unfortunately continues. Violent conflict must be set aside, and the system and the spirit of the resolution is to foster dialogue, inclusion, and understanding. The kind of world we strive for is the world where our children and their children deserve. Is a world where, although devastating conflicts may be going on, there is a commitment, and many people are striving to promote peace and trust. If you look at the images on our television across the world, especially in those places that conflict goes on, you will see how much people are striving for a world that allows them to really meet their dreams and live in a peaceful manner. The scourge of war is why the UN was set, and the scourge of war is why this resolution was introduced by Turkmenistan and others who supported it. Today, I call on all of you who are here, member states, civil society organizations, and others, to recommit to peaceful coexistence and promoting peace. As we observe this important day, let us spread the message of unity, understanding in your own circles, and call for resolving conflict through an inclusive and negotiated manner. This directive, sponsored by Turkmenistan, is not only for this year. It's something we are in dire need every year and every day. I hope you will join us in making it a reality. Thank you very much. Shukriya.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I now request Ambassador Syed Haider Shah, Additional Secretary, United Nations and Organization of Islamic Cooperation at Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Islamabad, to please make your remarks, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Respected Ambassador Suhail Mahmood, Ambassador Atar Jan, the Dean of Diplomatic Corps, Resident Coordinator Mr. Yahya, and other distinguished guests here and senior colleagues. It's a privilege to be here today. The Foreign Secretary was expected to be here, but unfortunately she could not make it because of some other pressing engagements. And I find myself at the podium addressing a topic which is very close to my heart, and as a diplomat it should be the question of peace and trust. We recognize the efforts of Turkmenistan in terms of peace and in terms of neutrality, and the initiative your country has taken. We appreciate those efforts for peace, for fostering peace, and we do hope that this initiative would also result in inculcating the culture of peace that we are talking about. The topic and the theme of the resolution about international peace and trust cannot be more topical and pertinent in today's context. We all talk about peace, but what are the requirements, the prerequisites of peace? I think a word which we often use very liberally in our conversations, in our discussions, is trust. We only come to know the magnitude of this and the import of this term when we do not have trust, and how it impacts the relationship. There is a tendency to see states as something different from human beings, but states are collectivities, and they are groups of different individuals, and just like individuals, the trust is the foremost requirement of your enduring relationships. Within the state's comity, the need for trust cannot be gainsaid. It is something that has been there. I'll give you one example how trust is important. The Indus Water Treaty, for instance, between Pakistan and India. There was an article in the Indian press a few years back, and they narrated how this treaty was formed. Given the history of relationship between Pakistan and India, it was considered to be a miracle in a sense that the two countries managed to come together and create a treaty, a mechanism for ordering their relationships in terms of distribution of waters for a long term. How this came about, and how was this possible? The writer at that time, they did some research, and they said that one factor was that incidentally the two sides, the Pakistani delegation and the Indian delegation, they were led by two individuals who happened to be friends and classmates, or they had worked together in some capacity before the creation of the two countries. And that singular fact was so important and so pivotal in helping the two delegations overcome their differences. Once the two leaders gave direction to their respective delegations that we needed to find an answer, we need to have a solution, the delegations then ordered themselves, and they came up. It was a long process, no doubt. It took many years to arrive at this treaty. But what it's the most pivotal element in that entire process was the trust, that these two individuals, they could see eye to each other, and they had trust in each other, and that then flowed through their delegations, and it led to this agreement. So it shows the need for human requirement to be able to trust what you are saying, what the other person is saying, what they are averring, and what they are going to implement. In the case of states, how do we translate that trust? I think the foremost requirement is the implementation of promises and commitments that you make. So for us, there is a binding document, the UN Charter. This resolution makes frequent references to the UN Charter. And it's very clear that it starts with the first line is that we want it's a commitment by the United Nations to save the succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And then it spells out how it's going to be done. One of the foremost requirements is, for instance, in Article 25 of the Charter, that member states commit themselves to carry out the decisions of the Security Council. So whatever the Security Council, being a representative body of the UN, it decides, then the member states who are part of the UN, they undertake to implement those decisions. And that then becomes the foundation of trust, because if what the Security Council espouses, based on the input of the member states, if the member states carry out those instructions, those decisions, then it would foster confidence among the people, among the nations of the world. So the faithful implementation of the Security Council resolutions, or of the UN Charter, or of international law, or of other bilateral commitments or multilateral commitments that member states take is the cornerstone of trust. That shows your commitment to resist temptation, to avoid violating your own commitments. So that is very important. And without trust, peace is an illusion. peace, it has been said, it is not just the absence of war. So how can we have that peace in a meaningful way as to be able to contribute to development, sustainable development? It has to be founded on trust among states. One factor which has been contributing to the deficit of trust is the extreme diversity of opinions, of views and values within member states. At a certain level, it appears that the world is very diverse, and there are many different ways of looking at things, and probably there is a view that the values that people share are also very different. But what is forgotten is that this diversity can also be viewed as a strength of the international community. That despite these values, the different values and different cultures, we all accord a certain sanctity to the concept of peace. And that is something that we have to build on and capitalize. And I think that the initiative of Turkmenistan is very timely. I think this is something that the international community should pay more attention to. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, we cannot stress more the importance of this aspect. As the resident coordinator mentioned, different conflicts around the world. They underscored the need for fuller commitment and adherence to the principles of international law and of the commitments that states have undertaken either through the UN framework, through other multilateral or bilateral frameworks, to observe those commitments. I think there are different ways to do that. The ambassador of Turkmenistan also included those, mentioned those, for instance, preventive diplomacy, but also I think conflict resolution, peace, post-conflict reconstruction, as well as economic development of different regions, and free trade among different nations. These are all different principles. If they were to be observed by all countries without any preconditions, probably that would serve our common purpose of fostering trust. And without trust, peace would only remain a dream. If there is trust and commitment to international principles, we would have a solution of many problems. The different conflicts in different parts of the world, including the one in Kashmir, Ukraine, Gaza, in Africa, in other parts of the world, the problem is that there are solutions available. There are principles available. What we need is a commitment to walk the talk, to implement them. And I think if everybody agrees to implement their commitments and the principles that we all espouse, we all claim to believe in, I think we can have a solution for our future. I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your enlightening remarks. I would now request all the panelists and guests to come here for the group photo. I would request the speakers as well to please join us. I now request Ambassador Saeed Haider Shah Sahab to please receive the memento from His Excellency Ambassador Atad Jan Moblamo. I now request Mr. Muhammad Yahya to please receive his memento from the ambassador. I now request Ambassador Khalid Mahmood to please receive his memento, sir. I now request Ambassador Suhail Mahmood to please receive his memento, sir. I now request Dr. Talat Shabir, Director CPSC, to please receive his memento, sir. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start our working session in 3 minutes. We'll have a 3-minute stretch break. Kindly remain seated and we'll start the session soon. Thank you, sir.
Hello, mic check, check 1 2. Hello, mic check test. Mic check test. Hello, mic check, check 1 2. क्यों रख रहा बोला? Hello, mic check test 1 2 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly settle down so that we can start our next session. You can please bring your tea and coffee to your seat. Thank you. Distinguished guests, please settle down so that we can start our next session. You can please bring your cup of tea to your seat. I now request speakers to please come on the stage. Dr. Talat, sir, you may have the stage.
May I request all of you to please settle down so that we begin the next session. Please settle down. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue with this important seminar on International Year of Peace and Trust, Cooperation for Peace, this session aims to delve deeper into the essential role of diplomacy, academia, and practice in fostering peace and trust among nations. Peace is not just a goal, it is a process that requires constant dialogue, understanding, and cooperation at multiple levels. To provide a comprehensive and multidimensional perspective, we have with us three distinguished speakers who bring unique insights from diplomatic, academic, and practical domains. Mr. Masood Khalid, a seasoned diplomat, will share insights on the role of diplomacy in fostering international peace and trust, particularly in the evolving global order. Dr. Maria Effendi, an esteemed academic, will provide an analytical and scholarly perspective on the importance of peace studies, conflict resolution, and multilateral cooperation. Ms. Amara Durrani, a practitioner with vast experience in peace building, will highlight the ongoing ground realities, challenges, and strategies for sustainable peace initiative. The session will help us understand how diplomatic engagement, academic discourse, and practical interventions collectively contribute to advancing the ideals of peace and trust. With these brief remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Ambassador Masood Khalid for his remarks. Ambassador Masood Khalid is a seasoned diplomat with an illustrious career in Pakistan's Foreign Service. He served as Pakistan's ambassador to China from 2013 to 2019 and has held key diplomatic positions, including ambassador to South Korea, High Commissioner to Malaysia, and Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations in New York. Ambassador Khalid also held senior roles at Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Sir, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, Chairman of the Board of Governors of ISSI, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Ambassador Suhail Mahmood, Director General ISSI, Dr. Talat Shabir, Director of China-Pakistan Study Center, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Well, first of all, my thanks to ISSI for giving me this opportunity here to share my thoughts on this theme which we are discussing today. Let me begin by commending Turkmenistan for their initiative in mooting this UN General Assembly resolution proclaiming this year as the International Year of Peace and Trust. The resolution portrays global aspiration for peace and development with United Nations as its embodiment. Ladies and gentlemen, UN was created from the ashes of a destructive world war which claimed more than 55 to 60 million lives. The preamble of the UN Charter affirms, the very first page, the preamble, affirms the determination of member states to save the future generations from the scourge of war. Of course, if we look at the scorecard, then we find that it gives a mixed picture. I would say the UN glass is not empty, it is half full. And despite efforts to marginalize United Nations, it still remains a symbol of hope and deliverance for the majority of countries, as it is there where they raise their voice for fairness and justice in international system. When the Cold War ended, hopes were expressed for a new era of peace and security. And here I would like to quote former US President George Bush when he addressed the Congress in 1990, and he said, "A new world order can emerge, a new era free from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace, an era in which the nations of the world, East and West, North and South, prosper and live in harmony, a world quite different from the one we have known," unquote. More than 3 decades later, we find our world far from being harmonious or peaceful. In fact, it is at an inflection point. International community seems to be failing to meet myriad challenges of our time. Be it issues of peace and security, mass migrations, international justice, climate change, or global trade, the drift is too ominous to ignore. Atomic scientists have set the doomsday clock close to 89 seconds before midnight, when the world can come to an end. This is their latest narrative. And they cite nuclear risks, climate change, the potential misuse of advances in biological sciences, and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, and insufficient progress in controlling these risks to be the key factors in making their assessment. Scientists have warned that, and I quote, "Setting the doomsday clock at 89 seconds at midnight is a warning to all leaders," unquote. The global risks of military application of artificial intelligence are also growing and are worrisome. Although the world order is moving towards multipolarity, we see far less reliance on multilateralism. Instead, unilateralism, protectionism, decoupling, closed borders, mass deportations, racial profiling, Islamophobia are setting the new norms in international political discourse dominated by powerful countries. Already agreed treaties and multilateral arrangements which sought to inject stability and fairness in international political and economic architecture are being challenged or repudiated. International efforts at arms control and disarmament are at a standstill. Instead, we are witnessing an escalating arms race, emergence of new hotspots, and weaponization of trade. Securitization of oceans is intensifying, threatening the global economy, which is dependent on trade through safe and open oceans. Human rights is a bogey in the hands of powerful to bully less powerful. Merciless killing of innocent people in Gaza and Lebanon by Israel, and ongoing repression in the Indian-occupied Kashmir by India, and the silence of those who claim to be the champions of human rights and democracy will be recorded as a shameful chapter in our history and degradation of human consciousness and indifference. Despite fervent calls by the United Nations Secretary General for course correction, there is lack of political will as well as a vision to confront the challenges. The world can no longer be controlled by a small group of big or wealthy countries. Threats are transnational, and no single country can tackle them. The world is now too closely interconnected and complex, thanks to globalization, to be separated by erecting firewalls or ill-thought-out policy interventions. And here I found this quote, which is very relevant, by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, and I quote, "Cooperation is no longer a choice, but a clear imperative," unquote. UN General Assembly resolution adopted on 21st March 2024 is a call for introspection. It reminds us that avenues are still available at the disposal of international community through the United Nations to settle the disputes and resolve conflicts. Pacific settlement of disputes, peacekeeping, peace-building, preventive diplomacy, sustainable development are such instruments to be employed for conflict prevention and for promotion of a sustainable economic order. Although the UN Secretary General is empowered under the UN Charter to use mediation and his good offices for diffusing tensions and conflict prevention, his authority has been crippled due to arbitrary use of veto power. It goes without saying that despite the operational constraints, United Nations has rendered great service to the extent possible since its inception in promoting peace and security, led the dialogue process on climate change, set up Agenda 21, Millennium Development Goals and SDGs for economic development, helped conclude important treaties like CTBT, supported programs and projects in developing countries for socio-economic development and women empowerment, and of course, in dealing with the world refugee crisis. UN peacekeeping operations, where Pakistan is a leading participant, have helped in navigating the path from conflict to peace. Ladies and gentlemen, each year, the world leaders gather in New York for a General Assembly session, make commitments, and pass resolutions. Yet each year, the Secretary General reminds them of their failure to live up to their commitments. This failure cannot be attributed to the United Nations, but to a great degree to a select group of rich and powerful countries who want to maintain status quo. The voice of the poor and developing countries is muzzled. Climate financing, for example, essential to deal with the existential challenge of climate change, is nowhere in sight. And I would like to share with you that the Loss and Damage Fund, which was set up at COP28 to support vulnerable nations faces a funding gap with only $700 million pledged so far against $387 billion per year. So a change is needed in this approach now. All countries, big or small, are sovereign and equal in the eyes of international law. It is the responsibility of influential and powerful countries to fulfill their pledge, to bridge the growing divide, promote a culture of peace, forge interstate cooperation, and encourage inter-civilizational dialogue and interface of faiths and religions to promote tolerance and harmony in our world. There has to be a new global compact on peaceful coexistence, mutual respect. The General Assembly resolution provides a way forward to utilize the tools of dialogue, conciliation, mediation, and good offices to resolve disputes and conflicts. Alternative is a looming catastrophe. It is time to go back to the principles enshrined in the UN Charter and international law so as to leave a peaceful world and a harmonious world for our future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I think this reflects your optimism with multilateralism when you say UN glass is half full. Though definitely there are challenges to this multilateralism in the world where unilateralism actually is taking a lot of effort by the world. Cooperation is not a choice, but imperative. I think this is very important. That if we want to take advantage of multilateralism in the world, I think we'll have to focus more on cooperation in the multilateralism domain. Thank you very much, sir, for your very candid remarks. I would now request Ms. Amara Durrani. She is Assistant Resident Representative of UNDP in Pakistan. She is a seasoned public policy professional with over 23 years of experience in strategic planning, program management, and advocacy across public, private, and international development sectors. Currently, she is serving as Assistant Resident Representative at UNDP. She previously held leadership positions at UNDP as well as USAID. Ms. Durrani began her career as a journalist and has taught at prestigious universities in Pakistan. Ms. Durrani, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Shabir. Director General ISSI, Dr. Sohail Mahmood, Honorable Ambassador of Turkmenistan, Excellency Ajan Mavlamov, our resident coordinator, Mo, who left, Excellencies, distinguished panelists, my old friend from Karachi University, Dr. Maria Afandi, Ambassador Masood Khalid, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I am truly honored to be representing the United Nations Development Program at this August forum today to mark the International Year of Peace and Trust Cooperation for Peace as per the United Nations resolution. It is doubly encouraging and heartening for me as a UN worker to see that our hosts today have decided through this one action to start this year by convening this forum, which in itself sends a very important message. Unfortunately, because of the last few years, global and regional political turmoil, conflict, economic collapse, peace and trust have become a secondary conversation. They've become an afterthought. To start 2025 with this discourse signals that governments and institutions are cognizant today to mean business. And that is the imperative that we require. There was conversation here earlier about the need for commitment, and this is demonstrated here today by the organizers of this important forum. Let me allude to a beautiful example provided by Additional Secretary from the Foreign Office when he quoted an example of a Pakistani and an Indian diplomat coming together to come up with a solution which fostered an important track for bilateral and regional peace. At the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, we are the custodians of human development. A concept and a word which was coined together by preeminent Pakistani economist Dr. Mehboob ul-Haq, late, and preeminent Indian economist Dr. Amartya Sen. Both were students together at the University of Cambridge. I also studied at that August University. Both of them together recognized the common problems of the two countries, not just India and Pakistan, but also of South Asia as a whole, Bangladesh, Nepal, etc. They felt the pain together of the deprivation of their populations. And as a solution, because what a development worker like me aims to do is not just to highlight the problems, but to also come up with solutions to address those problems. As a solution, they came up with the matrix of the Human Development Index, which measures all countries' standing, social, economic, etc., on the basis of core life standards, health, education, women's empowerment, scientific development, etc. And that led to the creation of the Human Development and the Human Development Index. The UNDP, as the custodian of the HDI, releases the Human Development Report every year, which measures the state of HD in all countries. Why I quote this example is to show that when individuals from different backgrounds recognize commonality of their challenges, they work together across borders, across institutional barriers, across cultures to come up with global solutions, and that is multilateralism. As an officer of the United Nations, how I practice multilateralism in my day-to-day work, I think it is very important that when we talk about multilateralism, we need to understand how it is actually practiced to support peace and development for all countries, and that will explain, that enhances its importance. Every day from morning till night, we work across different time zones, Bangkok, Pakistan, New York, Europe, etc. I work with other UN colleagues in India, in Bangladesh, in Iran, in Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia. We are constantly looking at commonalities of issues, exchanging country practices. So if I need to understand how India is working on the SDGs, if I need to understand how Bangladesh is accomplishing its SDGs or climate change resilience, especially managing their floods challenge, if I need to understand how our East Asian countries are accomplishing partnerships with the private sector, if I need to understand how Afghanistan and Iran are pursuing rights-based policies, especially pertaining to women's economic and political empowerment, I pick up the phone and I talk to them. And we collaborate and we work on initiatives which we then offer to the respective country governments in which we are all positioned. And we try at our level to bring those countries together. And even if official tracks are slow or if they're non-existent, at least to the UN agencies, those solutions are implemented in aid of the countries and their people. This is how multilateralism continues to work, not only in times of peace and prosperity, but also in times of conflicts and crisis where it is tested the most. This is such a time. We are not only looking at the situation, our speakers earlier alluded to the situation in the Middle East, in Ukraine. We also now have new governments who seem to look at the global international order differently, undertaking unilateral actions which directly affect the working of multilateral institutions such as the United Nations. And let me also say that today, the multinational system is increasingly going beyond the United Nations. So for instance, international financial institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, other multilateral development banks, they also form the multilateral system. And they are now a key stakeholder of how socioeconomic and political development occurs in countries because of their complex intertwined relationships with the member states. So while we see an expansion of traditional multilateral system wherein the UN is no longer just the only actor, the international financial systems and the MDBs and a lot of private sector companies which are operating on trans-border issues, giants like Google, like Facebook, which in themselves become multinational actors, the landscape has changed. So you have created in the last 75, 80 years, this is the year when the United Nations is celebrating its 80th anniversary and the UNDP is celebrating its 65th anniversary. We are taking stock of a multilateral system where the actors have diversified, and there is tremendous educational, scientific, economic value that they bring to the table. How do you influence this multilateral system? How do you engage with them to ensure that at the end of the day, the most important stakeholder and the beneficiary, which is the people, the human beings for which the multilateral system has been created, continues to receive the development outcomes, the economic and prosperity outcomes for which we work together. I was recently in Africa on a personal trip, and I noticed that, in the last 2 or 3 decades, at least when I started working as a young student and then a professional, the European Union has been cited as the strongest example of regional cooperation, followed by, examples in East Asia, in Latin America. South Asia has always been highlighted as a region with a very strong potential for successful regionalism, but a potential never met because of existing conflicts and tensions in the region. Something very interesting is happening in Africa, which historically has been cited as an example of underdeveloped socioeconomic indicators. Today you see a very different Africa, where you're seeing a very committed effort, regional as a bloc, to work together to pursue better human development indicators, economic enterprise. And I think after Africa and East Asia, we're seeing the beginnings of a continent which is rising above traditional conflicts to work together and bring betterment for their countries. That's the kind of cross-border regional cooperation approach that we need in South Asia also, where governments come together, leverage multilateral institutions like the UN, leverage and use our tools, our capabilities, our resources to improve the lives and livelihoods of our people and basically bring prosperity for our people. UNDP special report, which came out a couple of years ago, New Threats to Human Security in Anthropocene, demanding greater solidarity, highlights that the biggest problem right now is how people everywhere, in every country, are beginning to feel more and more unsafe, unsure, hopeless. That permeation of a global human feeling of anxiety, it needs to be addressed specifically by the global community. There has been reference to the resolution, UN resolution, which has led to the 2025 being marked as International Year of Peace. I want to highlight here that last year, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, we had the historic Summit of the Future, where the United Nations, together, Secretary General, together with the member states representatives, came together to look at the last, especially remaining 5 years of the Agenda 2030, and how the current state of the world poses challenges to the state of multilateralism and what it specifically means for the future of development. The United Nations had a preamble of the Pact of the Future. The whole approach of the Secretary General and the UN system is to locate the conversation and the debate on multilateralism, not on existing generations, but actually caring for the future generations, that what is the kind of the world that we will leave behind for young people, the future of the future generations. And unless and until efforts are made to salvage multilateral system, to restore trust between governments and within the multilateral systems, there is a high probability that we will not leave behind a better world for the future generations. There were 5 areas that the UN system has identified as keys for salvaging the multilateral system and for enabling it to be of better service to the world. Sustainable development and financing. There is no more a conversation of politics and peace which is divorced from the question of finance and money. So that is the first one. The second one, a no-brainer, international peace and security. The third one, science, technology, innovation, and digital cooperation. Fourth, youth and future generations, and of course that includes women. And fifth, transforming global governance. Here in Pakistan, to mark the Summit of the Future last year, the Resident Coordinator Office, together with agencies like UNDP, we actually convened a range of consultations, not only with the government, but also with civil society, academia, representatives of business sectors, etc. And we brought them together to hear them, to understand how they look at the multilateral system. And that discussion was very enlightening for my colleagues in the UN system to understand how we are being perceived and what are the expectations from the people of Pakistan. That resulted in the historic Islamabad Declaration, which was passed on the 13th of September 2024. Whatever documents I'm referring to here are easily available, and we will be happy to provide the same to you. And I'm just, going to highlight what we heard from the people of Pakistan, which became the part of the declaration. This is the expectation that we take very seriously within the UN system. First, just to highlight some of the most important messages, all countries, including Pakistan, should reaffirm their commitment to global collaboration to accelerate inclusive achievement of the SDGs. Number 2, efforts to eradicate extreme multidimensional poverty must be redoubled. Number 3, renew the social contract and build a rights-based economy. Number 4, value the planet for its own sake. Number 5, transform debt servicing and global financing models. Number 6, reform the international financial architecture and mitigate financing capacity gaps. There are a host of very valuable other recommendations that we were able to collate from listening to the people. And I think a key success to whatever we're trying to do here as multilateral operators, as policymakers, as academia, is to listen to our beneficiaries and to respond to their emerging needs. I congratulate once again the organizers of this August Forum at the United Nations Development Programme. I take this opportunity to reiterate our commitment to work closely with the government and the people of Pakistan in advancing Agenda 2030 through the multilateral system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amara Durrani, Assistant Resident Representative of UNDP in Pakistan. Thank you very much for giving a practitioner's view of how this multilateralism works. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would invite Dr. Maria Saifuddin Effendi for her remarks. She is Head of Department of Peace and Conflict Studies at National Defense University. She is an expert in conflict resolution with a focus on South Asian conflict and peace-building models. Dr. Effendi has published 2 books and 19 research papers on conflict resolution. Dr. Effendi, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, Ambassador Suhail Mahmood Sahab, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood Sahab, Dr. Talat Shabir Sahab, and Embassy of Turkmenistan and UN Office, Pakistan. I am truly privileged and I feel honored being here in this August gathering. Well, I'm here to share an academic perspective on UNGA Resolution 78/266, especially with regard to the role of academia, research, education, and academic discourse, scholarly discourse, in order to promote peace, cooperation, trust throughout the world. Now, peace is not a theory. It's not a concept. It's an action. It's a deliberated, well-thought decision that individuals, organizations, states, communities, societies choose to take to develop and grow and prosper in the comity of nations. To my very humble understanding as a student of peace studies and conflict resolution, I identify 3 key areas where researchers, civil society, academics, students can contribute to promote peace, trust, cooperation for a peaceful world. Number 1 is teaching and training to develop the capacity to promote peace or the culture of peace, which we refer as peace education. In our academic discourse, we refer it as peace education. Now, what is peace education? Peace education is the development of certain skill set, attitudes, behaviors, where peace is treated as a value, as a norm, as a practice. Just like Amara said, multilateralism is not a concept, it's a practice. We practice it every day. In our own capacity as a student, as a government official, as an ambassador or diplomat, as a development agency worker. The same way, when we talk about peace, we have to inculcate the value as part of our curriculum by promoting critical thinking skills, by incorporating various concepts of peace and practices of peace, such as non-violence, such as dialogue, interfaith harmony, such as diversity, inclusivity, human rights, human dignity, respect, tolerance, human rights, sense of belongingness as one global community. Through inculcating all these concepts in overall curriculum, not only at undergrad programs, study programs, but also through promoting all these concepts by offering them, by creating the environment at elementary education system. Now, I have a very good example to quote here. UNESCO Peace Education Model, which was established in 1953, by establishing Associated Schools Project Network, which is a global network of some 8,000 educational institutions in 177 member states. It has a very holistic approach. It aims to develop various initiatives and support various initiatives in education sector of the member states where UNESCO has been supporting the training of teachers program. We have to train the teachers, the researchers, to think about peace, to adopt peace as a value, as a norm, as a behavior, as a daily practice. It's not something utopian which can only be talked about, which can only be written about, which can only be studied. It has to be adopted as our own behavior, which will further promote peace as part of the state system. And finally, to international state system. Now, UNESCO has been supporting peace curriculum, developing peace curriculum to counter war curriculum, to reject glorifying war and to promote and glorify peace through multilateralism, interfaith dialogue or intrafaith dialogue, through harmony, through various projects, through reforming and revising the national curricula of various countries. The countries that have been supported through peace education model by UNESCO, Albania is one of them, Nepal, Sri Lanka, India, Liberia, and Asia Pacific region. So that is one way to develop culture of peace, by inculcating all these values and practices in our curriculum, which looks very easy to talk about, which is not very easy to implement. But political will, greater commitment can make it happen. Number two is the area number two where I see role of civil society academia, excuse me, campaigning, advocacy, and raising awareness throughout the recent history, global recent history, starting from Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., to Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, we have seen that students and civil society had shaken the world about racial segregation, discrimination, genocide, violence in different parts of the world. Recently, we have seen how students from Harvard to Oxford to various world-renowned universities have protested against Israel's aggression in Gaza. And this all happened because they were aware of the basic human rights, about the concepts of peace, about the practices of nonviolence, about discrimination against a portion of humanity, and about genocide. Even if they did not bring an end to violence, they were influential and powerful enough to raise awareness and to share the other side of their story in the war of competing narratives on electronic and social media. My third area that I'd identify as where we can make considerable difference, significant difference, is promoting policy-oriented research. As I said earlier, that peace is not a theory or a concept we can write 5,000 words or 8,000 words. It's more about a practice and implementable solution. So policy-oriented research which can be adopted by the government, by the institutions, by the organizations, and ultimately by international system to promote peaceful coexistence, justice, human rights as a single rule of order for all conflict zones in the world. It's the policy-oriented research that will lead us to believe that there has to be a single lens to look at world conflicts. The survivor of Ukraine-Russia war and the survivor of Gaza's genocide committed by Israel deserves the same respect, empathy, consideration, and therefore it also helps us, the policy-oriented research also helps us to understand that the solution of Palestine-Israel conflict is not what the US President Donald Trump has recently suggested, that instead of returning back to Gaza, the Palestinian refugees should seek resettlement in other parts of the world. Now, that is not the solution. The solution is to make them go back, provide them enough security, and implement the principle of territorial sovereignty to them, rather than seeking a resettlement of Palestinians in other parts of the world. It also leads us to conclude that solution for people of a disputed territory lies in giving them their due right for self-determination and not an abrogation of Article 370 and 35A and changing their constitutional status in India. So it's policy-oriented research which lead us to identify the root causes and propose implementable solutions. In the end, I would also like to congratulate all of us that we are very privileged to celebrate International Year of Peace and Trust. Well, it is, but it is actually very difficult to celebrate peace when half of the global south is dipped in blood, genocide, hunger, poverty, and continuous violence such as in Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Kashmir, Sudan, Afghanistan, and many other countries where human rights are continuously violated. While we are celebrating International Year of Peace, I would suggest that we should also celebrate International Year of Survival, where all of the victims and survivors of these conflict zones have made it to 2025. I thank you for having me over here and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maria, for your academic viewpoint on multilateralism. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we come to the end of our presentations. We have a couple of minutes. We can just have few brief comments or questions. Please, you can identify the panelists also. If there's no question, we can conclude.
We all agree with what we have said.
You have? Yes. Gilani.
Thank you very much. My name is Hassan Gilani, working for Pakistan Television as a reporter. As was revealed in one of the recent events organized by ISSI, that last year was a year of elections. We saw several countries holding elections, several new leaders came to power, several retained powers and several lost powers. Is that going to have any impact towards promoting the goal of declaring or implementing the vision of declaring 2025 as a year of peace and trust, with new leaders coming up, new vision, new policies, new dynamics?
Sir. And set up, Mr. Khalid.
Basically, you are referring to democracy as a promoter. Well, there are opinions, different opinions. Democracy has been under stress in several parts of the world. Mere elections have, you would see there are examples, mere elections do not automatically lead to peace in a society or create a stable environment. At times it does. But as an instrument of political process, I think democracy remains very important. And because it's a participatory process whereby you allow people to express their views and choose their candidates who are mandated to carry out their program or implement their manifesto in a stipulated time period. Well, there are other models also where there is no democracy as such in the Westminster sense, yet they are successful. Models of economic development and human progress. So it's a mixed picture.
मारिया जी, आप डॉक्टर दुरानी जी.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent question. It's a question that at the United Nations right now we are actively contemplating, because even if there are democracies, there is a shift and change in the nature of politics. We are witnessing populism as a new form of democracy. It has very important repercussions for peace and also for the multilateral system. Because the multilateral system, as I referred to in my comments earlier, is a composition of the member states, the countries who come together. Countries are led by leaders, and policies of countries are determined by their leaders. As you and I speak in this forum, for instance, United States has last week paused all of its international development assistance. And it is not just the United Nations, which is the world's premier development and humanitarian partner, in receipt of funds from the United States and other developed countries. It is also many other multilateral systems and organizations who will be affected by this pause. Because the beauty of multilateral system is that we are now living in a highly complex, interconnected global system. One decision, one policy action affects that entire global order. I think while you have that challenge, because it leads to tension, it leads to new issues, you also have the opportunity of the multilateral system to engage with such democratic leaderships, to convince them, and I would refer you to the Secretary General's statement from 3 days ago in response to the United States pause on international development assistance, how the Secretary General has expressed concern and also a commitment to engage with the US government in a dialogue to see how the leadership in the United States can be convinced and sensitized on the repercussions of how that action actually affects global peace, security, and humanitarian action.
Thank you. Maria?
Well, democracy is basically a standard operating procedure to have peace, because it gives you all the ideals, all the principles that promotes, assures peace, inclusivity, participatory politics, accountability. But at the same time, I think while we are talking about democracy, we should give, I'm talking about the underdeveloped world, democracy in the underdeveloped world. So if we want to have democracy in underdeveloped world, we have to give them enough chance to learn about democracy, what it is. And the people who are there as decision makers, by deciding whom to vote, they should be given enough education to decide and promote democracy. So that is what I see as one of the principles. If we want to have peace, we have to promote democracy, but through certain training, not by just creating a democratic setup. Thank you.
Thank you. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman, Board of Governors, for his concluding remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency, Ambassador of Turkmenistan, representative of the UN office in Islamabad, Director General ISSI, members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of missions, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, see, the world has witnessed throughout millennia, wars, conflicts, destruction. But at the same time, there has been an aspiration of the international community to have peace and cooperation. Many philosophers spoke of it, many practitioners tried to realize this aspiration. And it took a long time that the first universal organization, the League of Nations, came into being after the World War I. And the focus was to avoid recurrence of war, to avoid destruction, loss of life. But the League also failed. Why? Because the focus was only on security. Now, following the devastation caused by World War II, the concept of peace was expanded, that it is not just absence of fighting war, but something more positive. And as was pointed out by the panelists, that we need not only absence of fighting, but also respect for human rights, social economic progress. It is only by this approach that we can ensure comprehensive security. So in fact now this is reflected in the UN. UN is a tripod, 3 legs: security, economic, social progress, and respect for human rights. Now we see that unfortunately there is a big gap between the proclamations and the ground realities. And it is a constant effort on the part of the well-meaning statesmen, countries, to bridge this gap. And here I would like to commend and appreciate the initiative of Turkmenistan, a country which is committed to positive neutrality, to have taken the initiative for declaring this 20-25 years as the year of peace and trust. It is a humble effort. Everyone knows that this is the path to redemption, progress, prosperity, peace. But the international community needs to be jolted time and again. Their conscience needs to be pricked time and again that this is the path. Peace and trust, progress, respect for human rights, etc. See, things have not much changed as is witnessed, demonstrated by the developments in Gaza, Ukraine, Kashmir, in parts of Africa like Sudan, Congo, what's happening there. See, Mussolini, talking of the League of Nations, said the League is all right when sparrows shout, but is of no avail when eagles fall out. And that's what's happening now also. That when bigger, large countries' interests are involved and they are at conflict with each other, the organizations fail. But I think we should not have also very high hopes of multilateralism. Multilateralism is essential, and it is reflected, as said, in the League of Nations and then in the United Nations concepts. Because I think the Secretary General, former Secretary General UN, Dag Hammarskjöld, had rightly said that the UN is not there to take you to heaven, but to save you from hell. I think the United Nations has passed this test, and the initiative of Turkmenistan is very timely in this situation, and we look forward to the culmination of the celebration or observance of this year in the end of this year in December, when Turkmenistan is going to organize a big international conference. I think 2025 is not the only year of peace and trust. We need to observe this year every year. It is the importance of this subject which calls for it. So thank you very much for taking part in this initiative of the ISSI, and thank you all the distinguished panelists. I think we are wiser, and we should listen to the conscience of international community, which calls for peace, security, development, respect for human rights, and trust above all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now request Ambassador Khalid Mahmood to please present the mementos to our distinguished speakers. I would request Ambassador Masood Khalid to please receive a memento from Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, sir. I now request Ms. Amara Durrani to please receive the memento. I now request Dr. Maria Afandi to please come and receive the memento. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we come to the end of today's seminar, and on behalf of Team ISSI, I'm thankful to your kind participation today. Looking forward to host you again, and tea is served at the back. Thank you.